Right, okay, so welcome everybody to our Enable Flexible Working in the Built Environment webinar. Lovely to see you all. And as I just said, we're going to record today's session, but if you could turn your microphone off, I think most of you have done that now, but keep your cameras on so we can see you. It's nice to see smiley faces as we go through this. We want this to be interactive, so the way it's going to work is Jess, who I'll introduce in a minute, is going to lead us through the workshop. She's going to lead us through some content around what is flex, why is it important, what are the benefits, etc. And then we're going to open it up for people to share their experiences. We've got a few people lined up to start the conversation. So Lisa from Canal Insulation will share some examples from her organisation. Hopefully, I'm not even sure she's here yet, but somebody from Hughes Gray is going to share theirs, and then Sally from Selco is definitely arriving a bit later to share her experiences, and then we'd like to hear from anybody else, and we'd like to open it up to questions as well. So we'll hopefully it'll be a bit more interactive in the second half of the workshop. Hang on, I've got one more waiting to come in. Let me do that. Right, so let's move on. I'm going to hand over to Jess now. So I'm going to hand over to her slides. Jess, do you want to take over? And
yeah,
and I'll run the slides. Just let me know if when you want me to move on to the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Anthea. So thank you everyone for joining the session this lunchtime. Today we're going to look at the flexible working challenges and solutions within the built environment. I think we all know the industry often runs on long hours, could be driven by client timelines, site demands and safety requirements, which can make flexible working a challenge to implement. But today we're going to try and explore some of the practical ways forward. And as Anthea said before, we'd love to hear your ideas and experiences too later on in the session. So we go to the next slide. So hi everyone, I'm Jess. I've got to admit this picture is an old one. This was before I had 2 kids. As you can see, I have worked within the built environment sector myself, just shy of 10 years now. And I've seen firsthand the challenges and the huge opportunities that flexible and flexibility can bring to the workplace when we get it right. I'm joined by Anthea, the Project Director of the Construction Inclusion Coalition, and by Lisa Flaherty, who is the People Director at Canal Insulation, who is one of the strategic partners. So before we get started, a quick poll. When you hear the term flexible working, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Hopefully a poll will come on now. You'll be able to select an answer.
Yeah, so I'm going to launch a poll. If you don't see it, on the bottom right hand corner of your screen is a box with meeting tools. I'm going to press launch now, but you don't see it. If you click in there, you should be able to find the poll option. So this poll is now live. Can you see the poll, Jess?
I can.
Lisa, can you see it?
Yeah, it's there.
It's there. Yeah. Good. So, okay.
So we've got first option. We already offer some flexibility. We haven't figured it out yet. Our roles don't allow it, or we've never discussed it as a business. You want to put your answer in, and hopefully we can get
and I can't see the names, by the way. I can't see who's saying what, so feel free to be honest.
Yeah, everyone put their answer in. Is there any can you share a response?
So I'm not sure what happens when I press end poll. So let me just read out what we've got so far, just in case when I press end, does it just disappear? So we've got 11 people that said yes, we already offer some flexibility. 3 votes for we haven't figured it out yet, but we want to, and no votes for the others. So everybody here is doing something. Yeah, I know what
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fab. Okay, so if we go on to the next page, we're going to discuss the problem of flexible working and what it can bring in terms of the perception within the industry, the benefits of flexible working, and also some solutions of how we can implement flexible working within the built environment. So first of all, if we talk about the problem first. So we know that companies want to do the right thing with flexible working, but sometimes the structure of the industry we work in often gets in the way. We can be faced with challenges such as fixed shift patterns, client-driven demands, as I mentioned earlier, and all of this can make flexibility feel unrealistic. We've also got a lot of roles, if not the majority of roles, that require to be on site. So things like hybrid working can also be a challenge. And then if we think culturally, I personally think we still see a lot of the old school mindset when it comes to flexibility within the workplace, and that expectation that you are on site for a set period of time, and this is your job, you come to work when we say, and that's the end of it. Where we know since COVID, the landscape of flexibility within the workplace has changed massively. So another poll, if we go on to the next slide, what are some of the biggest barriers that you see in your business to making flexibility work? And I suppose this isn't a poll, actually, this is just in terms of the open-ended question. So if you want to put some in the chat or shout out in terms of some of the barriers that you're currently facing.
Yes, the chat box can be found in the same place near where the polls were. If you don't know Google, so put your answer in the chat or come off mute and talk to us. Right. Can you see the chat? Shall I read out what's coming through?
I can see, yeah. So different roles. Yeah, just expand on that. What do you mean by different roles? In terms of like some come
on, Emily and Tina have come off mute so they can talk.
Well, we've got we're office and manufacturing based on the same site, so that does make it more challenging because we can be slightly more flexible in the office, but manufacturing stick to, you need a certain amount of people online, certain hours. So it's a bit more.
It's more fixed than it is.
And I suppose you can't set like a blanket response with that because of the different expectations and different requirements in those roles. So you need more like bespoke for certain teams and departments. Okay. But some of the other ones that have come up, customer facing roles require everyone to be in during the set hours. Yeah, definitely familiar with that one. I did see one come up before with mindset as well. And I think that comes back down to cultural perceptions.
You've got, just in the box, we've got rigid work culture, old school mindsets, trust, non-manufacturing and manufacturing differences, shift patterns, hybrid for shift patterns for manufacturing, hybrid for head office. Factory-based roles, difficult is based on shifts and the number of people per shift requirements. Office much easier. Managers' approach to flexibility is a barrier. We've talked about customer-facing roles. Time off and lieu options for management roles on plant can be useful rather than just working excess hours in specific weeks. Take the time back when possible.
Okay, that's interesting. So I think a lot of those are things that I've come across as well. It's not there's nothing there that shocks me. I think we probably see a lot of that across the industry. If we go on to the next slide. So when we talk to business leaders and HR leaders within the built environment industry, a few consistent challenges come up again and again. So the shift patterns, sometimes you need a set number of people on a shift pattern. Maybe there's health and safety requirements, or there's a set number that is needed to operate a machine. So if somebody wanted to leave earlier on that day, it would be a challenge to allow that. Project deadlines with tight time frames and lean targets. We all know within our sector, we do run quite agile and lean operating models, and sometimes it can feel that there's no room to be flexible. Cultural mindset, I think, is a big one. Are our executive leaders equipped with the knowledge and equipped with the mindset to start this? Because essentially we need the leaders on board to start implementing flexible working, because it will have to come from the top in terms of approval. So are our leaders equipped to operate in this way? And then also probably can be underestimated, but limited internal resources. So sometimes it can feel too complex to manage or to police flexibility on top of everything else. So the example before, in terms of different roles, it can whilst you may want to implement flexible working, it could seem like too much of an admin burden to look at every single department and put a bespoke pattern in place for each of those. So the challenges, they are real, they are there, but they're not impossible to overcome. So something that was really, really interesting to read, and a great example of flexibility in action, is the TimeWise Construction Pioneers pilot. So this was a project that was run in partnership with Build UK, the CITV, and 4 major construction firms. They tested flexible working approaches on live construction sites. So all, construction site, you need to be on site. All roles that require presence on site as opposed to, office-based roles. They trialed options like staggered start times, compressed hours, and flexi days. And despite challenges that come up and the changes that they implemented, every project stayed on time and on budget. And the results were pretty impressive. They saw well-being scores jumping from 48% to 84%, which is a huge momentum. And several sites even reported higher productivity and lower turnover. One of the site supervisors said that they're getting the same work done in 8 hours that used to take 10 hours, and that was because of that increase of flexibility and that shift in work-life balance. So it's a really good example of how flexible working can actually work in practice. It's also a really good resource to have with some great data points that would help put a business case together for your own organisation. So we will send a copy of the report out after this webinar, because I think it's a great place to go and have a look and use some of the information and the data in there to try and put together a business proposal and see if you can get any ideas from what they did. So I'm sure we all know this, flexibility, it is a business advantage. It's not just a perk, it is of course a benefit for an employee to have flexibility within their working environment, but it is also a business advantage. And there's evidence from the built environment which shows that when companies embrace flexible working, they don't just support the people and the EVP, like their value proposition, they actually improve on their business performance and their productivity metrics. If we go to the next slide, we've got another question. So what are some of the obvious business advantage that you see currently from flexible working? It might not be something that you see within your own organisation, but that you can see generally from flexible working.
So people want to use the chat box or come off mute, chat out.
Yeah, engagement and therefore performance. Yeah.
Lots on engagement, yeah. Happier workforce, yeah.
Encourages diversity, yeah, great one.
Better work-life balance. Gives people a sense of autonomy. That's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Retention, a couple on retention. Loyalty, because people feel trusted. That's a great one.
Reduction in sickness absence,
yeah.
So it's clear really, isn't it? The more flexibility you give to employees, the more engaged that they'll feel, and when employees feel engaged, you can assume that they will be more productive because they feel a greater connection to the organisation, and as such they put in an increased effort. In terms of, if we go over the next slide, sorry. In terms of some of the other benefits, as we said, retention and diversity and employer branding. The CIPD, which is the accreditation body for human resources, their research shows that flexibility can reduce turnover by as much as 87%. So that is huge. We know, it's highly costly to replace people when they leave the business. I've seen figures of around it costs 30k per employee when someone leaves, and I suppose it comes down to the cost of the replacement, the cost of retraining the person, Maybe the loss of productivity if there's a gap in between, obviously when someone isn't fully competent as they're still going through their training. So it can be huge. That cost of turnover, actually, if you flip that in terms of your flexible work, and I'm pretty sure you would see a greater return on investment by implementing the flexible working strategies as a way to reduce turnover. In the built environment, particularly in construction, where skills are in short supply, it's a game changer. The more talent we can retain in the industry, the better. By offering flexibility, companies can keep the best people, attract talent, and also build a reputation as a modern, inclusive employer that people actually want to work for. In terms of diversity, we're saying we want more women within the industry. Women probably would look for, flexible working options, and maybe that's a reason that women are not necessarily coming towards the built environment, because it's not an industry that is fully adequate in that offering at the minute. If we go on to the next slide. So there's also assumed financial benefits from flexible working. So I mentioned before about potential return on investment, but there's some things that we maybe don't think about. It doesn't come to our mind straight away in terms of consumable cost. So we've seen after COVID that potential cost savings from setups like remote or hybrid working can see a reduction in consumable cost. Now, whilst fully remote working is not really feasible for the built environment industry in those roles that are required to be on site, we may still see a drop in consumable costs when we consider things like hybrid working for the more office-based roles, due to a drop in energy consumption. Again, very minor, but if it's tracked on a P&L, I'm pretty sure over time there would be a return on investment there. Reduced absences, someone mentioned before in the chat. Yeah, that is a huge financial benefit. Again, going back to the TimeWise pilot, all of the 4 participating firms reported a drop in sickness absence after introducing flexible working. If you think of it as a real life example, maybe somebody needs to, I don't know, they've got a commitment that they can't get a holiday for, and as such they're going to phone in sick instead. And sometimes, if someone's off sick one day, they may say, well, I'll be off sick a couple of days because I phoned in, and the way statutory sick pay is at the minute, you might not get paid until you've been off for a certain amount of time. And had flexibility been in place in the first place, and this person felt able just to request that time or use a flexi day, then potentially they wouldn't have been off sick, and they wouldn't have been away from the business for that length of period. But it's not just about cost savings. Research shows that flexible working actually contributed to an estimated £12.7 billion in productivity gains. So it comes back to that engagement. When people feel like the company is investing in their work-life balance and cares about their life outside of work, then you would assume that you would get more back from that person in terms of their productivity. So I think all of those things combined, it's clear that flexibility can actually deliver a real return on investment. So there is a business case from a financial perspective, as well as an employee engagement perspective as well. Some of the misconceptions, one of the biggest myths I hear is that flexible working is just for parents, particularly women with children. I think this comes down to societal norms that we're all frantically trying to change. But flexibility benefits everyone, from site managers managing long commutes, to apprentices studying part-time, for anyone balancing care and responsibilities, or for people who just want to go to the gym on their lunchtime. It is for everybody. The Timewise pilot actually found that men were equally likely to want flexibility, but they often didn't feel that they were able to ask. Again, is that a societal issue? Maybe so, but it's something that we can change within our own internal organisations. I know a conversation that I had with Anthea and Lisa before this call was around leave loudly example. If you want to explain that, Anthea, because I thought that was a really good example.
Yeah, so those of you who are at the conference will have heard would have heard it was Gemma from Barrett say she encourages her leaders, if they're ever going to leave to go to a school play or to pick the kids up from school or whatever, she says, do it really loudly. Make sure everybody knows you're doing it, because people follow you. So if they see senior leaders, particularly senior male leaders, actively taking the time to go and do stuff for families, etc., leave early, then it sets the tone for everybody else. So leave loudly was a real thing that's resonated with me as things we need to do as leaders. Yeah.
Thank you. Another misconception is it can't work on site. Some of it can't. You can't be fully remote and be on site at the same time. But I think sometimes people think that flexibility only applies to office-based roles, and that's not the case. You know, you can look at different types of flexibility for the different types of roles. And again, going back to the Timewise pilot, across the companies who participated, the teams introduced options like staggered start times, shift swaps, and compressed hours, and they saw no drop in productivity, and all the project targets stayed on time, and they delivered without any increase on cost. So it's not about removing structure from the business. I think it's more around designing smarter structures that work for both the business and its people. Another great example, actually, and it may be from someone in the group today. Again, it was something that Anthea brought to my attention, was a company started looking at hours that they needed rather than the actual heads. So rather than thinking how many people do I need, how many hours do I need to cover, and then consider that as a total FTE percentage, and see how you can split that across people across hours rather than people. But I don't know, is a lady joining, Anthea?
Yes, that's Sally from Selco. She's joining. She's joining us in a bit, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah.
More about
great.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the final misconception is it doesn't have to be formal. There is obviously a legal obligation for employers to consider formal flexible work requests, but the whole planning and implementation of flexibility within the workplace, it can happen in an informal manner too. It doesn't have to be a case of someone's going to submit a formal flexible working request and we have to sit down as a business and go through all the legalities. If you are more proactive and say, actually, we're going to introduce some informal flexibility, and it could just be a case of creating the environment where employees feel safe that they can say, look, can I leave half an hour early on Friday because of X, Y, and Z? Or do you mind if I take a longer lunch? I'm willing to work later on, work the hours back through the week. It can be informal subjects like that. It doesn't always have to be a formal policy, a blanket approach for everybody. You can start small and informal too. But if we look at the legal context, thanks, Neil. Again, a lot of time people feel that they do need to justify it, but that's great that you're creating that environment where people, you're trusting them to do the right thing, and I'm sure you'll be getting it back, from them as well, because people really do value that trust element.
Yeah, I think there's often a guilt associated with it, isn't it? You get people putting a ton of hours and they want to knock off an hour early, and they go through, I can't possibly do that. You can, and you're doing it. Go now. Yeah.
It's even like, with those roles that travel. So I know myself in the past, I've traveled, to different sites and probably worked a lot longer hours. And then just the ability to know that I can actually take half a day later on in the week without having to justify, like, I worked an extra hour this day, I worked over my lunch, and just that trust from the leaders, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing it this week. I've got a long week, early start Monday, staying away from home all week, get finished with a big meeting Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock, and I said, I'm in the car, I'm going home. I've got 2.5-hour journey home, I'm gone. So I will take the point on board about leave loudly and announce that. Like, I'm gone.
And Neil, let's just tell everybody, you are a head of manufacturing.
I am head of manufacturing.
So let's be really clear, you can do it in manufacturing.
I can, and I'm one that set that standard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, thanks for that, Neil. So in terms of the legal context, as we know, everyone is entitled to make a formal flexible working request from day one of employment. It used to have 26 weeks service, I think it was, but now it's from day one of employment. So there are some formalities around employees being able to request it. All employers must reasonably consider flexible working requests. And employees can now make up to 2 requests per rolling 12-month period. As a business, you can't simply just refuse them. You can't, just say no because we don't want to. You have to follow ACAS guidance, and I think there's 8 legitimate reasons in that guidance of how or why someone may reject a flexible working request, and you also have to consult with that employee if the answer is no. I'm sure you will have seen some reference to the employment rights bill at the minute. It's going back into with a huge list of amendments. But flexible working is in there somewhere, and there's not much change proposed. I think originally it was said that flexible worker was going to be the default, which I think is unrealistic. I think businesses need to allow to set the structure and then work around that. But it's going back into from the government and the House of Lords, and I think at the minute they're basically saying that they just want employers to be reasonable. If they're going to reject the request, it has to be a reasonable reason. Yes, it has to follow ACAS, but don't be robotic with it. Like, really show the employee that you have considered it, and that the reason that you can't do it is a reasonable justification, and it will then have to be in writing as well. But personally, I think it's far better to think about flexibility proactively before a request comes in, so that you are ready with practical scenario-based solutions, and that you can really drive the momentum. You can implement the flexible working strategies. You can set the tone in terms of the culture. So it's you who's providing that as a benefit for employees, rather than employees, coming and asking if they can and explaining, why and so on. It's much better as an employer to really drive that. And again, to attract and retain the best talent in the industry, you're going to want to be able to show that you are a flexible employer. An example of where you may want to be proactive and slightly different includes an element of flexible working and working with a company. I was working with a company recently who implemented an armed forces policy, so slightly different to your just general flexible working, but that armed forces policy incorporated flexibility within it. So an example was for people who had served in the armed forces. They were able to have time away from work for example, for Remembrance Day. And then there was also flexibility for reservists. So people who, are on a reserve list with the armed forces, and they obviously have the flexibility to step away from the workplace for training days if they're called out for military service and so on. So there's different ways where flexibility may crop up. And you can really use it as a strategic advantage. The company I was working with, there was a real business reason why they wanted to have that policy in place, and just due to some sort of business relationships, but also a way to attract new talent in the industry. We know there's a huge deficit in the built environment construction skills. So if we can retain more people who potentially have that skill set by offering flexibility as well. So I think I've seen Sally join.
Sally's here, yeah, and Lisa's obviously here as well. So yeah, and
okay.
Joe's here. So we've got our 3 people. Yes.
Yeah. So I'd love to open it up really to the floor and explore any examples of where we've seen flexibility work within our own businesses. It could be something small and informal, or something more structured around shift patterns.
So should we start with Lisa? Because Lisa, I know you're prepared to go first.
Yeah, so hello everyone, I'm Lisa Flaherty. As Jess said at the beginning, I work for Knauf Installation. I know I've met a lot of you already. So like a lot of people said in the chat, we have the challenge of manufacturing and non-manufacturing. So in our head office, we have lots of flexibility, probably like a lot of you. In fact, if I think of my own team, including myself, almost all of us have some kind of flexible working pattern. But then when that comes to our manufacturing facility, it is much more difficult. So again, like some of you, we're a 24/7 operation. We work on shifts. So mornings, afternoons and nights, 24/7. And we are very much pushing against a very closed door in terms of flexibility with our leadership in the manufacturing side. So those shifts are the same shifts that everyone does across the whole globe. There is no flexibility with those shifts. However, we have managed a few examples that I'd like to share where we have been able to implement some flexibility. And the main one of that was actually a couple of years ago now. We had an employee who was looking towards retirement, didn't quite want to finish, but was sort of ready to wind down, and had come to us about some flexible working. And he came with the idea, which is always good as well. So he suggested a job share with one of his colleagues and friends who wanted to do the same thing. It wasn't immediately jumped on by the leadership, but we supported it, and we managed to put a job share in place for those 2 employees. So we work in cycles. So one would do 1 block. So they'd still do mornings, afternoons and nights, but they'd do the first block and then the other one would do the second block. So what that meant is that each employee had a bigger break. And so they were doing like 5 cycles rather than 10. And that was a really positive move that we made, and that we've seen other people pick up since. And then the other example, I actually only thought about this as flexibility when we were preparing for this with Jess, and we talked a little bit about more informal flexibility. So what we do allow the shift team to do is do their own shift swaps. So as long as they find someone who's got the same skill level as them, which they all know, they have the published competency matrix. So as long as someone else is able to cover their role, we will allow those shift swaps. So if someone wants to go to a school play or to kids football match and they are able to get someone else to cover them, we do allow that, and that works quite well within the team. And I hadn't even thought about that as flexibility until we were talking to Jess. We were kind of just like, yeah, that's what we do. So there are examples. What I will say is I totally sympathise with some of those comments in the chat, that it does feel a lot harder in manufacturing. And we're trying to push as we go and look towards our factories of the future for more flexibility and more resource to look at flexibility. So keep you posted on how that goes over the next few years.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. I think that's a brilliant example of, we often talk about attracting new skills into the industry, but it's about retaining them as well. And, the company could potentially lose 20 years worth of skill just, completely out the door, where this is more like a phased approach where there's a benefit for the employee from a flexible working perspective, but also the benefit from the employer to retain that knowledge in the business and hopefully, you know, hand that over to someone else who's joining.
Yeah, and that's definitely how we sold it, Jess, and actually it's led into more of a retirement policy that we're putting together at the moment that allows us to do more handovers. So it is a good sales point when you're trying to convince your leaders to do something different.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
Right, so Jo, do you want to go next? Just talk about what you've been doing in Hughes Gray.
Yeah, so I'm Jo Bamber from Hughes Gray, not Joanne Harrison as my little name on my picture suggests. Not sure where it's dredged that up from because I've been married 10 years next year. So probably not unlike many people in the group here, you know, flexible working is a really challenging concept for us and kind of challenging for our kind of operators to get their head around in the sense that, you know, we're open these hours, so everybody must be working these hours. And really, I've not got any specific examples, but just maybe some actions that we've taken over the course of the last year that is starting to have an impact, and we're starting to see not only more requests for flexible working, but certainly the more considered and thoughtful conversations around those requests, which have led to more of those being agreed. So really, you know, and these are probably just quite kind of baseline things that we've done, but we've kind of we've introduced our flexible working policy and supporting process, should I say. And alongside that, our HR business partners kind of supported our senior leaders in exploring what that means for the business and offered coaching and guidance kind of along the way when we had those requests. And really the focus there has been on encouraging managers to give every request due consideration, whether that's through just an informal process or the kind of formal application and kind of meeting process that follows, and also encouraging them if we're not sure if it could work, well, let's trial it, let's see it in action, let's make sure we've got some kind of clear criteria of what we deem to be successful flexible working situation for a colleague, so that we can properly evaluate that. And I think some of the pitfalls we'd had previously is we've said, oh, we'll trial it in the winter when we're quieter. Perhaps in the past, well, that's probably the worst time to trial it because we don't know the impact of it when we're busier. So so really they're the, like I say, really simple actions that we've taken, but we are starting to see the outcome of that is that we've got more colleagues that work flexibly. We've got more colleagues that feel like they are the business is open to flexible working. It's a sentiment that we're starting to track within our annual employee engagement or experience survey through Great Place to Work. Definitely not a nut that we've cracked. I think there's more work to do. So looking ahead, really what we want to do is explore what flexible working could look like within a merchant environment, but more importantly, kind of listen to our colleagues and try and understand from them what flexibility means to them and what would make the biggest difference. You know, I think there's been some examples there of, is it that I just want to be able to go to sports day? I don't want to reduce my hours or have a kind of a new fixed working pattern, but do I just need that flexibility to go off and see sports day or the Christmas play, you know, on an odd occasion? So that's what we'll be looking to do kind of to the future.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. I mean, it's so key what you say there in terms of raising awareness. While you may not be able to implement something immediately, you start by raising awareness within the organisation and speaking and listening to your employees. And I think on one of the slides following it, we say that as a solution about having, you know, maybe a focus group where employees really drive that. Obviously, the organisation has got to be transparent and manage expectations, but I think the more you can have the communication around flexible working in terms of what is possible, what may not be possible, you're already on that first step of making it happen. So it's really positive. Thanks
and I think
sharing.
sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming trying to fix what flexible working looks like for 4,500 colleagues. Actually, how do we involve managers in that? Because what might work in one branch might not work in another. So how do we create the framework or the environment
Yeah.
for them to work out what works best for
Yeah.
their branch or their location. So,
Yeah. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. Okay, and Sally, nice to see you.
Hi,
Like
thank
to
you for
share what
having
you've been
me.
doing, Sally. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Hi everyone, my name is Sally Kerr. I am the HR director for Selco Builders Warehouse, and we have recently joined the CIC. So thank you for having us, and thank you for inviting me to this call to discuss flexibility. I'm pretty certain this is traditional within our industry and sector, but the makeup of my employee base is predominantly full-time male. And trying to talk to store managers and regional managers around embracing part-time contracts has been a bit like hitting my head against a brick wall for a few years. And, you know, I just tried water torture. I just tried to just keep dripping and dripping and dripping away, hoping something would change. And I realized last year that you need to appeal to your audience. You know, I need to hit them with facts and not opinion, you know, not a Sally Kerr opinion, not a female opinion, but I need to give them some facts around why a flexible workforce is a good idea in order to run their operations, because that stimulates them at the end of the day. And I knew that we had a declining female base. So, you know, 1/3 of my headcount is female, 33%, and I noticed that turning into 32%, 31%. And I know that I can't stand there on a stage at a conference and say, you must employ more women. Okay, I know I can't say that to the masses. That's not the right message. But I know I can say, employ more part-timers. I know I can say that because I know that brings the diversity then. So in January, just 15% of our headcount was part-time. And my new CEO actually said, look, that's not that bad for this industry, but you know, it's not brilliant, but it's not that bad. And by hitting them with the facts and science about the benefits of part-timers, and I've written some down, and these were my slides at the conference, you know, retention. So I could prove that 15% of our headcount that was part-time had great stability. Their average length of service was 2 years longer than the full-timers. Engagements, when we get our engagement survey raw data from the provider, they broke it down into demographics for me, and they did break down the engagement results of part-time versus full-time. Again, the part-timers were more engaged at the most recent engagement survey. And then there's the external applicants piece, because all of our managers hate recruiting, don't they? Haven't got enough candidates, not good enough, poor quality coming through. Actually, the data behind the scenes of the part-time and full-time vacancies that we had, the part-time vacancies literally had double the applicants. So more talent in the net for you to review. So they were my 3 messages. If you want stability, if you want more talent, and if you want them to be engaged, think part-time.
Yeah.
Since that messaging in January, we've seen the 15% part-time workforce increase by 1/3 by the end of September. My turnover is at its lowest. And again, maybe all of our turnover is at its lowest at the moment, given, you know, the economic and government uncertainty. But I just knew I couldn't go down the lens of gender to the masses. But of course, it has had that knock-on effect, you know, that the increase in part-time contracts and the flexibility that brings has, you know, restored the female-male split to 34%, which is great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's really interesting to hear, actually, in terms of the employee survey, to make that split.
Yeah, and
it's
it's
a
you know
really
if
good,
you can get that data, you know, if you are
Yeah.
in an organisation that does annual engagement surveys, you know, we're not going to use them going forward because we're deciding to go for a new change, but we used a company called Best Companies.
Yeah.
And they can split it down to all those demographics that
Yeah.
you want as well, which is really helpful to labour your point.
Yeah.
We know it makes sense.
The more
you know,
data you've got, the better, isn't it?
absolutely, you know, it's
Yeah.
about making data-driven decisions at the end of the day, isn't it? And not being emotive about it.
Yeah.
And
Fantastic.
so-
Thanks for
And
sharing
so,
that,
Sally,
Sally.
Sally, it's something you shared with me, which I know Jess picked up on earlier because I shared it with Jess, was you were encouraging your business to think rather than heads, but think how many hours.
Hours.
Yeah.
That, I guess that
Yeah.
was you know, my strap line was think hours, not heads. You know,
Yeah.
I need a cleaner. Okay, you might need a cleaner, but that's probably 20 hours, not 39. It's
Yeah.
and just equating everything. It sounds really archaic, doesn't it? But you know, we assume everything is 39 hours.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's collecting trolleys, cleaning, you know, we assume every task is 39 hours. And it's just a bit of again, that water torture, you know, just trying to dispel that and break it down.
Yeah. That was a fantastic way of thinking about it in terms of those hours, especially, you know, when you're looking at your financials, you tend to look at FTE anyway. You don't look at
Exactly.
heads. And I often
and
think
that's
heads
our
is probably
fault.
not the
I
nicest
know.
way
I've
to
gone to
describe
my,
people as well.
I've gone to my new finance director and said that we're not helpful here. We equate everything to FTE. So, you know, when we're budgeting for 2026, can we talk, you know, hours when it comes to deployment? So, you know, can we say to a store, you've got 4,000 hours, not 32 FTE, and just start to get that mindset going.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Right.
Thanks, Sally.
No, thank you.
Right. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share or any questions you'd like to ask Jo, Sally, or Lisa before we move on? Don't be shy.
I think really interesting point around part-time, and not something I'd really considered either. So definitely something I'll be kind of sharing with the team when I do a bit of an update. So I mean, I had one example around time off in lieu around a kind of first line manager type level in the factory, that he put in a flexible working request, which the initial instinct was to reject because he basically wanted to work. He wanted to bank an extra week's worth of holiday over the year, so he could take it off, so he had more flex with his kids and everything like that. But there was a real pushback, including me at the time, to be fair, about does that set precedent? And therefore, everyone's going to come to us, and we kind of, you work in an industry where you expect people flex for you, that they kind of work the extra hours, but then we're not thinking enough about taking it back. And because he wanted to formalize it through time off, and they were like, does this start everyone doing it? And there's that nervousness in the business, but we've cracked on and done it anyway. And I'll look at how we kind of do that wider. But there was that reluctance to try it because suddenly you create a bigger problem and you're relying on people working too many hours anyway, which is wrong.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example of how you can offer that flexibility. And again, I can appreciate how it could be difficult to forecast, but even if you've forecasted, you assumed there was going to be an extra 3 days across everyone and done like a blended average as an example, you know. But I think a lot of the time people are reluctant to agree into flexible working because of the whole thing around, is everyone going to ask for the same? So yeah, it's good that you've took the plunge and gone with it.
Yeah, it wasn't without a lot of debate, including for myself, as I say. So it has changed my opinion as well. So
yeah.
There's something I heard yesterday. There's a company called Shape Talent who do research into gender equity. They did an update yesterday. One of the things they talked about was this, is there a fatigue around people saying that they've heard this thing about we must be more equitable be more fairer to women? Is there a fatigue around it? And they was saying it's understandable people feel that, but there were a number of reasons why we need to just push back when there is a fatigue. And they introduced something called the ideal worker. And apparently the ideal worker, and if you think about it, is someone who puts their job first. They'll be available 24/7, 365 days a year, and they don't actually spend a lot of time with their family. But the reality is, in today's world, that ideal worker, that group of people who are like that, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And as we get more younger people coming into the workplace, and certainly more women and men wanting to spend time with the family, that ideal worker doesn't exist. So we need to dispel that myth that the ideal worker is somebody who does their life is work, because they're declining. That worker is declining.
It's that multi-generational workforce.
Yeah.
I've got 5 generations working side by side, and we've got the alphas on the horizon. And they all want flexibility. They don't want 40-hour contracts. The Gen Zs and the upcoming alphas as well. And it's really adapting that from a leadership that's Gen X, really.
And that can be the issue, can't it, in terms of the leaders are sitting in a different demographics, and they're not quite understanding what the new demographics coming through are wanting. And that definitely can be the challenge in terms of getting our executive leadership boards on the same page as the talent coming through the door. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's probably quite a pivotal moment now as well. I think in about 5 years it'll be completely different. I think now is the time for change. Okay, yeah. So in terms of some of the solutions then, what can companies, particularly in the built environment, do to start building flexibility? We can start small. We don't have to change everything overnight. We mentioned before about informal arrangements or ad hoc requests. Just start there. Start by raising awareness and talking about flexibility. Engage your team. Ask what would make the biggest difference to them. Is it just going to be the odd day that they would like flexibility with, or are they looking for more structured approaches? You could start a focus group to gather those ideas and to increase engagement. Assess your culture and your leadership. Do your managers and your leaders understand what flexibility means in practice? How can you get your leaders on board? Sometimes they are the blocker. How can we overcome that? Try by submitting business proposals, including the data, including data as real examples and return on investment evidence. And offer trials. Nothing has to be permanent. A lot of the time, but even with formal flexible working, you quite often would see a trial period put in place first. So nothing has to be permanent. All we can do is try and see if it works and take it from there. Okay, so I've really enjoyed the session. As we look to wrap it up, are there any other questions or thoughts that you have about making flexible working or flexibility in general work within your business? And I suppose, what steps are you going to take from here?
I guess I got maybe a question more for the hybrid working office side of this industry. Conversation I had, we're doing a reverse mentorship process at the moment, and kind of my mentor, and still struggling with it being that way around. You're talking about he would like to work 2 days in the office, and we made an announcement about 3 days in the office for those that are based in the office. Didn't go down that well. But we wanted to formalise something as a leadership team. There's a lot of debate with the leadership team as well about what's the right balance. Most of us believe that we get better collaboration in an office space, but then talking to kind of my mentor, he's like, I'm absolutely fine doing everything digital. And I was struggling with that kind of human connection side, like I'm making a cup of tea, I'm having a chat, and then it turns into something, you've got an idea that I still struggle with. Believe that can possibly work in a digital workspace, and I don't know if anyone else has had that kind of battle or thoughts on actually it can do, rather than actually being physically together can be more productive as long as you've got that flex.
I personally think you do need balance. So I think you do need that time, that face-to-face time. And, you know, for some organisations, I suppose it all depends on the type of organisation. Maybe it does work, but I suppose if you are going to be fully remote, it's about having purpose in terms of bringing the team together in some kind of remote setting, or a day off site online, you know, a day on site. I personally think I like the more hybrid model, but I think it just depends based on the industry and the organisation itself.
I think it depends on the individual as well. I think, you know, as we have greater awareness around neurodiversity, what I'm learning is that some neurodiverse people work much better remotely, and they're much more productive, and they're much happier and more comfortable. So I wouldn't, I think having a one size fits all approach probably isn't the right answer. The other thing is where you are in your career. If you're early career, gosh, you need to be with other people. But if you're at my stage, I most work from home most of the time, and I still feel, you know, I feel like I can build the relationships that way. So I think it's about trying not to have one size fits all, and trying to think, right, what's best for this particular person, and do I need to be flexible, because for this person it would actually make them more productive.
Yeah, I was just going to say we do the same, Neil. We have a 3-day in the office standard. But we allow additional flexibility. So if individuals want to do more or less, we will allow that. So for that individual, I might look at maybe his standard could be 2 days in the office. However, put some other ground rules. If we have an in-person meeting, I would expect you to come to them. So it's not, you know, you're setting some expectations. I think one of the challenges we had was hybrid meetings are really challenging. So having some people in the office and some like dialing in just never seems to work very well. So it kind of is like, well, it's one or the other. So that they're the areas that I think you need to sort of have, you know, if we're going to have a meeting with more than 4 people, we all need to be in the same place, or we all need to be online. But I would maybe explore a little bit of flexibility for certain individuals, but you also get into that, well, then does everyone want 2 days? So
Okay, good.
It's got to mean something if you're in the office. There's no point having everyone in the office, but having everyone in online meetings, then you can't.
I think this business was like it just before I joined, where people were ill in the office, but all doing Teams, and like I got stopped fairly quickly.
Okay. Fab. Well, thank you so much for everyone joining today. I hope that it's shown that flexibility is possible within the built environment, and that small changes can make a big difference to well-being, engagement and business performance. If anyone would like support in exploring what flexible working could look like in your organisation, then please reach out to me. We'll be sending the slides out after the session along with the TimeWise pilot. And we'd love to hear from you in the near future with any progress in the area. I think we can all learn from each other. So what's worked for you may be a really good idea for another company. So please let's share best practice amongst the group. But thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks for joining us.
You too.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.